Let me read to you a passage from the 9th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 22 to 25. It's the Gospel for Thursday after Ash Wednesday. St. Luke writes, Jesus said to his disciples, "The Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be put to death, and on the third day rise again." He said to all, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, and the one who loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his very self?" That's from Luke chapter 9, verse 22 to 25. It suggests thoughts about suffering. As man works to fulfill his responsibilities, as he experiences living his very life, suffering bedevils his path. This feature of existence is so universal and seemingly so unavoidable as to constitute a marvel and a mystery. Just as man can find himself asking why there is not nothing, so he can find himself asking why there is not constant peace and happiness. Why does there have to be difficulty and suffering? For it seems that there has to be suffering. It is one of the great human questions that is answered to a point from on high in the timeless passages at the beginning of the book of Genesis. That there need not have been suffering is suggested in the first pages of this great book, where God is shown creating man in his own image and likeness. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Man is given dominion over the world with the task of filling the earth and subduing it. Chapter 1, verse 28. As God had worked and rested, man was to work and rest, but there is no talk of suffering. Whence then did suffering and death come? To account for suffering, the inspired author or authors employ a different account of the creation of man. Before there was plant or herb, God forms man from the dust, plants a garden in Eden in the east, and there he places the man he had formed. Then he made all the trees, including the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This latter tree, man was told, he must on no account eat, for in the day that you shall eat of it you shall die. Chapter 2, verse 17. Then God gave to him the woman, created from his rib. To this point there has been no talk of suffering, only of tilling and keeping the Garden of Eden, and of freely eating of every tree, except the one forbidden. The life of man is intended by the Creator to be one of work and mutual communion. But then the great question is addressed: whence came suffering and death? We know the tragedy that ensued. The serpent enticed the woman to rebel, and she enticed the man. Chapter 3, verse 1 to 7. We can sense the horror of God as he walks in the garden in the cool of the day and finds the couple now hiding from him. They avoid their beneficent Creator in fear because of their shame. Then God says to the woman his terrible words: "What is this that you have done?" What the man and the woman did is what caused the catastrophe of thwarting the intention of God for their happiness in the world. So there was nothing for it but the condemnation. There was to be strife between the serpent and the woman and her seed. There would be suffering for the woman in her mission as mother and wife, and the man would face resistance and toil in his work with the soil and finally he would return to dust. With that, the man was driven out of the garden, never to return. There was one great glimmer of hope. The seed of the woman will strike the head of the serpent. So then, there is suffering for all. Man will suffer a lot in fulfilling his mission on the earth, and it is his own doing. But that is not the end of it. The scene shifts from Adam and Eve to their immediate offspring, Cain and Abel. The Lord favors Abel's offering, and in some sense did not favor Cain's. But this of itself is not due to sin in Cain. However, sin crouched at Cain's door, and the imperative was that he master it, but he did not. Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Chapter 4, verse 8. So there we have the further factor in the history of man, the suffering of the just man due to the sinfulness of his companion. Into this sinful human condition there entered the Redeemer, divine and sinless, with the mission to make the new beginning and bring to man the life of God. The suffering that was man's course became his with a vengeance. But that suffering, accepted in obedience, became the source of life in abundance for all who accept him. The story of the creation of man and its sorry aftermath, as portrayed in the accounts of Genesis, can be seen as the ultimate background of the path of Jesus Christ to the cross. Man must traverse the path of suffering. But now we have a Redeemer whom we are to follow in that path. He has gone ahead along that way to glory, and he invites us to follow him. It is his way that we must pursue, and his cross that we must share. He said to all, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, and the one who loses his life for my sake will save it." Luke chapter 9, verse 22 to 25. Therein lies the way ahead for man.